Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the IUCN UK Peatland Programme's 2021 conference, entitled Peatlands in Partnership, A Road to Recovery. I'm Stuart Brooks, and I'm the chair of the Peatland Programme and one of its founders over 11 years ago now. I'm the head of conservation for the National Trust for Scotland and a member of the IUCN UK National Committee, which brings together representation from a wide range of conservation disciplines and members from all 4 national governments and NGOs. We have over 600 delegates registered for the conference this year, which is amazing actually. And some of you will have been with the programme from the beginning. And like me and many of my colleagues on the staff team, the steering group and within the broader peatland community, engaged with peatland conservation for many, many years. Some of you will be quite new, whether you're practitioners or policymakers or scientists. You're the next wave of peatland enthusiasts and advocates for their conservation. This mix of disciplines and geographies and career stages make these conferences worth doing every year. And it was a fact, one of the drivers really for establishing the programme in the first place, to help facilitate and support you, the wider peatland community. This year's conference, Peatlands in Partnership, A Road to Recovery, is our 11th conference, and the second one we have had to convene online due to the ongoing impacts of the global pandemic. Partnerships are so vital for our work, including this conference, which is brought to you in partnership with Pennine Peat Life and More Life 2020, 2 of the biggest peat-based life projects in the UK that are working together to report on the work they have done collectively over the past 4 years on blanket bog restoration, the use of unmanned aerial vehicles in monitoring, and the development of the UK Peatland Code. As 2021 welcomes the emergence of country-level plans for peatland conservation and management across the UK, this year's conference will celebrate the progress being made by peatland partnerships and communities in their efforts to protect, enhance, and restore our peatlands. We'll reflect on the funding, the evidence and communication needed to achieve effective action for peatlands, and explore learnings to ensure progress continues along a road to recovery. The framework for country-level plans, and indeed some of the international frameworks we will also be hearing about, share a common identity, and it has been really heartening to see how the UK Peatland Strategy, developed within our programme here, has helped to influence thinking at all levels. Over the 4 days, sessions will explore progress towards the UK Peatland Strategy goals, including conserving and enhancing the most readily recoverable peatlands, restoring the heavily degraded areas towards fully functioning peatland ecosystems, adaptive management, including paludiculture as wetter ways of farming and sustainable management, which are much more compatible with healthy peatlands. These are the themes around which the 4 days of this year's conference are built. The themes of coordination and communication run deeply throughout the conference sessions. And based on feedback from last year, which was obviously another virtual conference, this year's programme offers a timetabled hour each day to network with delegates and meet exhibitors. The networking space will be open throughout the conference, should you wish to chat with other delegates during the breaks. Our community seeds innovation, and of course, we have all had to respond to the challenges of the pandemic. This conference, like many others over the last year and a half, have had to adapt and find new ways of working. And actually, that's created some new opportunities too. We have a much larger audience than we would have had in kind of physical meetings. We've had significantly reduced our environmental impact, which is fantastic. And we have found new and exciting ways of communicating the wonders of peatlands. And in that regard, we are hugely, hugely indebted to Richard Lindsey, who many of you will know as one of the world's foremost experts on peatlands. He's an advisor and a member of our steering group and the creator of our virtual Peatlands Pavilion. We're so excited to welcome you all into the TARDIS-like dimensions of the pavilion and through its portal to Peatland Wonders. It's the venue for the conference's film night on Tuesday evening, and it's also going to be packed up and teleported up to Glasgow, where it's going to appear as a companion to the first ever dedicated real in-person physical peatland pavilion at COP26. This afternoon, I'll have the pleasure of chairing the Global Peatland session in the context of COP26 and the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. And just off the back of the IUCN World Congress in Marseille, the work of the peatland community here in the UK is having a major influence elsewhere. Some of the key conclusions from last year's conference are extremely relevant to the global community, and some of the solutions we have found can help support progress for countries as diverse as Indonesia, Peru, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, now working together under the auspices of the Global Peatland Initiative. Our conference will return to some of these issues and gauge progress on the need to build capacity to deliver restoration, including training and learning, the production of good practice guidance and standards for peatlands, and the need to ensure biodiversity, cultural values, and water are addressed along with climate, and the need to build long-term funding for healthy and recovering peatlands, and importantly, that we bring society along with us so they understand the benefits of protecting and restoring peatlands. And a large part of that needs to happen through use of public funding. Just very briefly, before I introduce our keynote speaker to start this year's conference, I wanted to share a recent experience with you, which after nearly 30 years of working to conserve peatlands, is a reminder to myself why these landscapes are special and unique. And it's also an explanation why I've got some ponies sat behind me in my conservatory here in Dunblane. The National Trust for Scotland is a guardian of some amazing peatland landscapes across Scotland, including on Unston Yell, right up in the top of the Shetland Isles. And I was there a few weeks ago talking to crofters and others who were restoring some of the blanket bogs there. And one evening, I visited one of our estates. It's pretty much as far north and as west as you can go in the UK. And I sat amongst the boulders, foundation of a Viking farm. And it's still visible today, over 1,000 years later. And there were other ghosts in the landscape of dwellings abandoned in the 16th and 17th centuries, and evidence of their use of the land in all the old peat cuttings, which are really clearly visible. I mean, this is pretty special enough, being able to see the history in the land so clearly. But the really memorable thing for me was this small herd of feral Shetland ponies that slowly approached me. And I saw them as a kind of living part of the landscape and a connection to our ancestors who lived and worked there. And I thought these ponies typified a resilience and a continuity of our presence, but also a dependency on us to maintain those landscapes for their cultural value and a living, unbroken connection to our planet. Anyway, that's enough from me. I've got really great pleasure this morning introducing our keynote speaker to open this year's conference, Dr. Craig Bennett, the Chief Executive of the Wildlife Trusts. Craig took up his position in April 2020, a difficult time, I imagine, having previously had a very influential period as Chief Executive of Friends of the Earth. And he's led coalitions of business groups on climate change action and has an ongoing role in executive and business programs. And he's an honorary professor of sustainability and innovation at the Alliance Manchester Business School. So thank you, Craig, and over to you.
Thank you, Stuart, and I'm delighted to be giving this keynote address as Chief Executive of the Wildlife Trust. Thank you very much for the invitation to do so. You know, the Wildlife Trusts have long been heavily involved in the IUCN Peatland programme, with Yorkshire and Scottish Wildlife Trusts long hosting the programme from its beginning. But we should also pay tribute to the long-standing support of peatland conservation, Peter de Haan, who provided much of the original funding for developing this programme. And likewise, I want to thank the Esme Fairbairn Foundation for their continuing support as well. I've just come back from the IUCN Congress in Marseille. I came back by train, of course, on Saturday night. And it was my first ever IUCN conference. It was absolutely incredible, incredibly inspiring, and incredible to see the range of work going on across this astonishing union that is IUCN around the world. And it was epitomized, what I saw in the last week, with inspiring stories about organizations working together in partnership to put nature in recovery in a way that is both good for nature and for the climate and for people. And you know, the IUCN, the Peatland programme of the IUCN UK National Committee epitomizes that spirit that I saw in Marseille last week. So let's talk about that. I mean, first of all, I would say, you know, this programme is about community. It's about working together in partnership, a community of policymakers, of practitioners, of scientists that have taken peatland up the political agenda, massively improved our understanding, and crucially brought about peatland restoration at a grand scale. That this partnership is based across the UK, but flexes to our devolved structures and is inextricably linked to global peatland conservation is testament to that partnership's ability to think global and act local. There are some great examples of that partnership in action. In Cambridgeshire, where I am now, I'm currently in Cambridge, but in North Cambridgeshire, the Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire and Northamptonshire Wildlife Trust have of course developed the Great Fen Partnership with a 50-year vision to restore some of the most expensive arable land in England to wetlands. It developed a grant partnership of academics, for example, from the University of East London, of policymakers within DEFRA and Natural England, and assembled a great team of practitioners to make it happen and persuaded funders to help make the vision a reality. And after just 15 years, they're miles ahead of schedule, and the Great Fen is developing before our eyes. I've been up there 3 times this past year. I've taken a couple of journalists up there, including Tom Fielden from the Today programme, who did a fantastic report about the Great Fen, and also journalists from the Telegraph that did a fantastic report there, and also policymakers up to the Great Fen. And all of them find that incredibly inspiring story, not just about what we can do about tired old peatland soils, much as that's really important, but also an inspiring model of how we can develop possibly truly regenerative agriculture in one of the most agriculturally important parts of the country. And also inspiring as a vision, a model, not just of how we can slow the loss of a crucial habitat, but how we can turn that around and restore crucial habitat, restore hydrology, restore ecosystem function, and restore species abundance. And of course, it's also inspiring of as an example about how we can tackle the climate and ecological emergency together in a way that's good for people and the economy. Another example is, of course, that from across the North Pennines, where the ANOB partnership has transformed the fortunes of those wonderful blanket peatlands stretching across the Durham and Cumbrian Pennines. Likewise, the Peak District National Park created the Moors for the Future partnership that pioneered blanket bog restoration, paving the way for others. I've had a good chance to see that this year as well. And of course, I'm particularly proud of the Wildlife Trust initiatives. The Carbon Landscape in Manchester, developed by Lancashire Wildlife Trust, the Yorkshire Peat Partnership that Yorkshire Wildlife Trust put together with the Yorkshire Dales National Park, the Cumbrian Peat Partnership, the work undertaken over decades through a partnership of Northumberland Wildlife Trust and the Forestry Commission on the Border Mires, to name one more. And there are plenty more examples. And the Avalon Marshes Partnership down in Somerset, where RSPB, Somerset Wildlife Trust and Natural England are restoring the wetland wonderfulness of the Somerset levels, working together with shared offices and shared equipment, partnership writ large. And the key here is partnership between NGOs like the Wildlife Trusts and others, between landowners and managers, farmers and foresters, gamekeepers and shooters, between industry and community, between government and its agencies. These are partnerships for common cause. We don't have to agree on everything. I doubt the Wildlife Trusts and the Moorland Association will ever fully agree on the role of burning in the uplands. But we can agree that peatlands are a common good, a good for recreation, shooting or walking, a good for good quality water, a good for flood control, and of course for its amazing wildlife, but also a good, of course, for climate resilience now, but of course so much more so in the decades ahead. And the wildlife of our peatlands really is amazing. Here in the UK, we are blessed with a mild and hyper-oceanic climate, giving rise to distinctive wildlife assemblages. Our Celtic rainforests, dripping with mosses and lichens, our sea kelp forests at sea, our bluebell woodlands, and our western grasslands, and of course, our chalk streams, incredibly important habitats. But it is our blanket bog that is most distinctive, our largest extent of semi-natural habitat, the dominant habitat of the far north and west of the UK. Globally rare, and so all the more precious. Across the world, peatlands harbour extraordinary biodiversity, from orangutan and carnivorous pitcher plants in Southeast Asia to red sphagnum carpets of Patagonia. They also, of course, are one of the world's most important carbon stores. So they are inextricably linked. The crisis of climate and nature coming together at scale in physical form for our peatlands. Achieving net zero has to include 100%, or as near as damn it, restoration of the world's peatlands, removing 5% at least, probably a lot more, of global carbon emissions and restoring global peatlands as a carbon sink. We have to remember, when we're talking about climate policy, actually net zero is not the destination. It's a milestone on the way to the destination, because the real destination we need to get to is net negative, going beyond net zero so that we can be drawing more carbon out the air than we put in every year and start to reduce the carbon dioxide parts per million in the atmosphere if we're going to really tackle climate change in the longer term. We have no hope at all of doing that until we can put our peatlands in restoration here in the UK and around the world. And with COP26 of the Climate Change Convention in Glasgow in just a couple of months' time, and the COP15 of the Biodiversity Convention signing off in Kunming, China next year, our UK governments, all four of them, need to step up their game on peatlands. So what are our asks of government? Well, first, let's sort out the peat and amateur gardening and horticulture, the peat use in amateur gardening and horticulture once and for all. You know, I find it hard to think across my career, over 25 years now of working in environmental campaigning and trying to deliver impact, I actually find it hard to think of an area where we've seen quite so much prevarication, so many excuses, so many missed targets, so many broken promises, for actually meaning that we don't really see the progress we need to see. Of course, it was really welcome to have the announcement from government, from DEFRA earlier this year, that they are now looking to ban the sale of peat in horticulture and amateur gardening. But we've got to get on with it as fast as we possibly can. The continuing use of peat in both amateur gardening and horticulture is a real stain on the reputation of the UK around both climate and nature. It's polluting our atmosphere. It's entirely unsustainable. Peat is not renewable in any human timescale and deeply damages our wildlife. It needs to stop. And I want to give a special message to those retailers and other companies that promised to stop selling peat by 2010, but of course have still failed to do so. If they can't even uphold that kind of promise to stop selling one product by 2010, and now 11 years later, they're still selling it, why actually should we believe their promises are out and bound reaching net zero by a certain date? You know, promises that are made by companies need to be delivered, and we need to see those promises to stop selling peat being delivered by our leading retailers. Surely 2021 should be the last very year that we see peat being sold by our major retailers, whether the government bans it sooner or later or not. And we call on government to implement that complete ban as soon as possible in both amateur and professional horticulture. And secondly, whilst we applaud government initiatives to restore peatlands, and the Deaf for Climate and Nature Fund and the Scottish Peatland Action are great, it's not enough. Even with restoration, peatlands take decades to restore their full ecological function. We need to be restoring all our peatlands now, in line with advice from the Committee on Climate Change. You know, peatlands have sometimes been described as the Cinderella habitat. I think we can safely say that because of the work of the IUCN UK Peatland programme, Cinderella finally has got her dancing shoes on and is dancing on the road to Paris. But if we are to meet 1.5 degrees or even 2 degrees of warming, she needs everyone to be dancing with her. Retailers, government, horticulture industry at large, and others. So let's all dance well and put peatlands into recovery at scale and as fast as possible. I hope you have a fantastic conference over the next few days. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Craig. That was a really excellent start to our conference. Really uplifting. I think some key messages there around partnerships, and that's the key theme of the conference over the next few days. And we're going to be listening and hearing and seeing, I think, some of the outcomes of those partnerships throughout the days. I think that message around urgency and scale is something that we kind of need to constantly emphasize, and some, I think, really good illustration of how kind of Cinderella has come out from her basement. We often reference that Cinderella point, I think, over the last few years, and it does kind of genuinely feel like, you know, she's kind of out here now. Okay, Craig, and I hope you're going to stay with us for some of the conference over the next few days. Good. Okay, it's my pleasure now to introduce to you Clifton Bain. Clifton was the director of the IUCN UK Peatland programme for 10 years and is now the programme advisor, and Clifton's based in Edinburgh. Clifton's a zoology graduate of Aberdeen University with over 30 years experience in wildlife conservation, working with the RSPB. And both Craig and myself worked with Clifton back in those kind of early days of the peat campaign. Clifton is now an environmental author with books published on ancient pine woods of Scotland, Atlantic oak woods, and Clifton's actually got a new book coming out on peatlands, which is ready to be published next month. So I'm going to hand over to Clifton.
Welcome to the update on the UK Peatland Strategy. The UK has something to be proud of. It's done well in putting frameworks in place for peatlands with the UK strategy and devolved country level plans in all 4 countries. We also have an effective strategic approach that delves into underlying the causes behind our challenges and looks at solutions to resolve these. So rather than just a protectionist approach, we don't ban farming on peatlands. We look at how to support farmers to manage peatlands sensitively. All our good foundation building cannot now be followed by an easing up. If we're going to deliver peatlands' contribution to climate change and biodiversity in less than a couple of decades and avoid leaving higher costs to society in future, we have to step up our efforts. This is a global challenge with global timescales, from the UN resolutions on peatlands to Ramsar and IUCN, as well as other important international agreements on sustainability, biodiversity, that will all need peatlands in good state to achieve their goals. The UK Peatland Strategy has a target for 2 million hectares of peatlands in good condition or under sustainable management by 2040. And the best estimate is we're halfway there. But we also have more urgent targets, such as the net zero targets by 2030 for climate change. And each country in the UK really needs to assess its peatland progress against these urgent timescales. I'm going to take a quick look at the actions within the strategy, and this table summarises most of the sort of high-level actions from our UK Peatland Strategy. It's really in there for you to delve into at a later stage, but it forms the backbone of the presentation. An important recommendation from previous conferences is for a 5-year review of our progress, where we really look at getting the data on progress against each of the actions and a proper appraisal of what urgently needs to be done. And unfortunately, we still don't have that process in place, so it's got to be an important one for the 4 countries to discuss. So just using my understanding of where we're at, I'll delve into some of the most urgent activities and actions that remain to be done with the Peatlands strategy. So the first is in relation to the state of our peatlands. We recently commissioned a report with Rebecca Arts and others for our Commission of Inquiry update that looked at the state of peatlands. And whilst it gives a lot of information, it is amazing just how much information we still don't have. We have to monitor progress against targets, not just so that we understand where we are in the strategy, but also understand our contribution to the big policy levers such as climate change, which help fund peatlands. And if we don't know how well we're helping those other goals, then we risk not maintaining interest and support. We also need to be looking at not just measuring the area of our peatland restoration work, but at the quantity of ecosystem services, so how much carbon has been secured. It's important that we don't lose sight of multiple objectives from peatland restoration. We mustn't become carbon fixated just because a peatland maybe isn't the best carbon securing measure. It might still be worthy of restoration for other reasons, biodiversity or water. Understanding where our peatlands are and what state they're in is still an urgent task, and we rapidly need to get definitions agreed across the UK, both on the different states of peatlands, but also on the trajectory stages, the restoration trajectory stages. Knowing and defining what these stages are will help us. We also need the long-term monitoring plots. These are vital in helping provide baseline information and riding through the sort of long-term changes that peatlands go through when you restore them. And we need more monitoring plots covering the range and diversity of peatland types and range across the UK. So that's our Eyes on the Bog work. In the policy and legislative area, we're going to need to deliver the various plans and strategies that we now have at national and devolved level. This needs staff commitments across the agencies and government departments, as well as long-term targets. And these help ride through any changes in ministers or governments or in staff. And ideally, targets in legislation to maintain that effort. And so far, we've got climate change targets and peatland targets in Scotland, but we haven't seen them elsewhere yet. We also mustn't lose sight of the need to protect our existing peatlands. There is still new damage taking place, and it's disheartening to hear that it's across built development, agriculture and forestry. Some of this is down to poor enforcement of policy, but some of it certainly needs new and stronger policy to address. The other important area in that respect is in terms of shallow peatlands. Now, a lot of our landscape is shallower peat, less than 50 centimetres, and it's increasingly clear that these are important both for biodiversity and for carbon, and we're going to need good, effective land use strategic action to work out how to balance different land uses on these widespread shallow peatlands. This is also the time, I think it's in my long career, it's probably the moment where peat and horticulture could finally get resolved. This is the opportunity not to just ban an industry, but to actually create a new sustainable horticulture industry, an exciting one that is using peat-free products and is thriving as a business and industry and not reliant on imports of unsustainable material or even unsustainably extracting the material from this country. Conflicting policies have become another issue. We've had in the past conflicting agriculture policies undermining peatland conservation, but we also now face conflicting global climate change policies. So the drive for renewables, the drive for trees is beginning to impact upon the equal goal of protecting and conserving our peatlands, and we need to get smarter so that we don't compromise our forests, our renewables and our peatlands, and seek to find a way to optimize both or all three of them. Money, it certainly comes down to finance and funding, one of the key strands of the strategy. And I think the big message that we have to take away at this stage is ensuring the true value of peatlands to society is reflected in the support given to those who own and manage peatlands. That has to be the focus. We've made great progress with government funding to restore peatlands, and we still need to expand that if we're going to deliver the scale and urgency of restoration needed. And private sector funding supported by the Peatland Code can help expand and speed up our efforts, but it can never be a replacement for further public funds. But we don't have yet the long-term funding mechanisms to sustain healthy and recovering peatlands. And the effort is going to have to be pursued in both the uplands and the lowlands, with agriculture payment schemes and private finance developed now to complement each other and specifically secure payment for societal goods from peatlands. There is a need to focus more on the lowland peatlands as an urgent threat, but not to move away from activity in the uplands. We just need to expand our effort in the lowlands, and it is a tough call. The high cost of arable and the value to farmers of the arable land in the lowlands. But we have solutions, and exciting work in wet farming, paludiculture is something that offers a farming future, but producing wetter crops that help safeguard the peatlands. Under the funding I've put monitoring and research, we still haven't got all the scientific information we need to assess progress on the strategy, but equally to understand and quantify the benefits of peatland conservation and registration and restoration. And I think it's something that as we go forward, we're going to have to get smarter at using the money that exists as well as using the partnerships that exist to get that research and survey done. We've just recently published a biodiversity assessment with our Commission of Inquiry update that shows just how poor our biodiversity monitoring and survey is and how difficult it is to quantify the biodiversity benefits of peatland restoration with the limited resources that are currently available. Finally, communication. last but not least, certainly, if we're going to get society understanding and valuing our peatlands, especially when finances are tight and there's many competing demands, we need to get society appreciating what we're doing and why it's worth the money. This requires the capacity and structures to deliver the huge scale of targets that we've got. If we're going to deliver all of this restoration quickly, we need trained staff, we need contractors, farming advisors, and partnerships in place to coordinate these large-scale works. And certainly in terms of the training staff, this has to become a new focus and priority with the learning and training. We need to engage people so they remain supportive, and that means making peatlands interesting and exciting and gathering the facts, having the information that people will relate to that makes them appreciate just how important peatlands are, but also getting people out to experience peatlands and enjoy being on them. And okay, COVID has made that harder, but there's still ways in which people can experience peatlands, and we've had some fantastic virtual events over the last 2 years. One of the great joys of recent years for me has been to witness the huge number of groups and partnerships that have formed to take forward peatland conservation, especially when you compare to the situation 20 years ago. And I think maintaining some umbrella group to support these various initiatives, learn from them and share, is even more important now at a time when we really have to make a concerted effort to meet our peatland strategy goals. To conclude, we've certainly embarked on a new era for peatlands. We're doing it in a way that is a lesson to other countries, and it is incredible just how much we've turned the corner, but the job's not yet done, and we've really got to increase our pace. Thank you.
Okay, thank you again, Craig, for the excellent introduction, for emphasising the value of partnership and the need for urgency and scale of action. And thanks there to Clifton as well for setting out the framework for how we deliver on many aspects. We're going to take a comfort break now, back at 11 a.m. And you'll see Clifton again there chairing a session that's leading on an update on our 4-country strategies and implementation. So see you back here at 11 o'clock.